Something quiet has been happening beneath the surface of modern intimacy, and most men don't see it until it's already changed them. It doesn't announce itself. There's no single moment of collapse. Instead, it moves like water through stone, slow, persistent, invisible, until the structure has already shifted. You can see it in the way a man texts, the way he apologizes for things he didn't do, the way he rearranges his entire week around someone who hasn't thought about him since Tuesday, the way he sits alone at night, scrolling through old conversations, looking for the exact moment respect turned into something else. It often starts with what feels like a connection. A woman enters his life, and suddenly, the days have texture again. The gym sessions feel purposeful because she might notice. The work has meaning because he can share it with her. The future, which had been this vague gray horizon, suddenly has color and shape. And for a while, this feels like an awakening, like finally living. But underneath, something else is happening, something he won't recognize until much later when he's sitting in his apartment, wondering why he feels like a stranger in his own life. You can map it in the small things, the way he starts checking his phone every 11 minutes, the way he begins sentences with "she thinks" or "she wants" or "she said," without realizing these phrases have replaced "I think" or "I want" or "I believe." The way his friends stop calling because he's been canceled 3 times in a row. The way his side project, the one that used to excite him at 3 in the morning, now sits untouched because his attention has been completely rerouted. And here's what makes this dangerous. He believes this is love. He believes this is what it means to care about someone. He believes the dissolution of his boundaries is evidence of his capacity for intimacy. Michel Foucault spent his life studying something most people never see: the mechanics of power. Not the obvious kind, not kings and armies and laws written in stone, but the subtle kind, the kind that moves through relationships, through language, through the small daily negotiations that determine who speaks and who listens, who pursues and who withdraws, who adapts and who remains unchanged. He understood that power isn't something you possess, it's something that flows through interactions, constantly shifting, constantly being tested and redistributed. And he saw with clinical precision that the most effective forms of control are the ones we participate in willingly, the ones we mistake for freedom or love or connection. Here is the thesis that runs beneath everything that follows. A man who makes a woman the center of his emotional world hands her a power she didn't ask for and cannot respect him for giving away. This isn't a moral judgment. It's a description of a mechanism, because what Foucault understood, and what modern men keep learning too late, is that power in relationships doesn't follow the rules we wish it would follow. It doesn't reward vulnerability for its own sake. It doesn't honor self-sacrifice as noble. It responds to presence, to sovereignty, to the man who remains unmoved by the need for constant validation. And when a man abandons his center, his mission, his standards, his internal compass, he doesn't become more attractive through his devotion. He becomes a problem to be managed, a weight to be carried, a source of quiet resentment that neither person can fully name. Foucault wrote in a world that was just beginning to see the collapse of old hierarchies, the 1960s and 70s in France, where every institution was being questioned, every power structure dismantled and examined. He watched as people celebrated liberation while simultaneously creating new, more subtle forms of control. He saw that when you remove the visible chains, people often forge invisible ones, and he asked a question that most philosophers avoided. What if we're not actually freer? What if we've just learned to police ourselves more effectively? What if the most sophisticated prison is the one where the inmates believe they're free? This applies directly to the modern man's experience in intimacy. He believes he's free because he can choose. He can swipe, approach, express his feelings, and be vulnerable. The culture tells him this is progress, that his grandfather's generation was repressed, closed off, and emotionally stunted, that he, by contrast, lives in a time of authentic connection. But here's what Foucault would see immediately. The man isn't freer. He's just responding to a different set of rules, a different system of power, one that's harder to see because it operates through psychology rather than prohibition. The old system told a man what he couldn't do. The new system tells him what he should feel, and the moment he starts performing that prescribed vulnerability, texting paragraphs about his emotions, seeking constant reassurance, making his internal state her responsibility, he's entered a game he doesn't understand. Because here's the mechanism Foucault identified: power flows toward the one who needs less, toward the one who can walk away, toward the one whose existence isn't contingent on the other person's approval. In any interaction, whoever is more willing to let it end holds the structural advantage. This isn't about manipulation or games. It's about the basic architecture of human relating. When a man centers his emotional stability around a woman's response to him, he's handed her total authority over his internal state. She didn't take it, he gave it. And now every text, every interaction, every conversation becomes a site of subtle power negotiation that he keeps losing because he's already decided he can't afford to lose her. I work with men who describe this exact feeling, and they always use similar language. They say, "I feel like I'm walking on eggshells. I don't know what version of myself to be. I keep trying to figure out what she wants." And what's happening underneath is that they've made her comfort more important than their own integrity. They've decided that maintaining the relationship, maintaining her approval, is worth more than keeping their sense of self. And once that exchange is made, once that trade is executed, the dynamic is set. She becomes the arbiter of reality. Her moods dictate his day. Her interest level determines his worth, and he wonders why the attraction that was there in the beginning has started to evaporate. Here's what most men miss. Women don't respect self-abandonment, even when they benefit from it, especially when they benefit from it. Because on some level, often unconscious, often unarticulated, she knows that a man who will dissolve his boundaries for her will dissolve them for anyone. A man who will abandon his mission because she's upset will leave it again the next time she's upset. A man who needs her validation to feel whole is not a man who could protect her, lead anything, or remain stable when life becomes difficult. And so the very behavior he believes proves his love becomes evidence of his weakness. Not because she's cruel, but because human psychology doesn't work the way Disney told him it works. Foucault called this subjectification, the process by which people become subjects, not in the sense of autonomous agents, but in the sense of being subjected to power. And the most effective subjectification happens when you do it to yourself, when you internalize the surveillance, when you regulate your own behavior based on what you imagine the other person expects. The man starts editing himself. He stops saying what he actually thinks. He performatively agrees with opinions he doesn't hold. He laughs at things that aren't funny. He pretends Saturday morning gym sessions aren't necessary when she wants to sleep in. He skips the work project that excites him because she interprets his focus as a sign of distance. And piece by piece, month by month, he becomes a curated version of himself optimized for her approval, emptied of the autonomy that made him interesting in the first place. Let me show you how this actually unfolds. In the beginning, there's a man who has a life. Maybe it's not perfect. Perhaps he's still building. But he has direction. He has things that matter to him, independent of female validation. He goes to the gym not because someone's watching, but because it's part of his structure. He works on his business, his craft, or his body because the act itself has meaning. He has friends, routines, and standards. And when he meets her, she's attracted to exactly this: the fact that he exists independently, that he's not trying to absorb her into his emptiness, but inviting her into his fullness. But then something shifts. Maybe she pulls back one weekend, and he feels that tightness in his chest, that fear that she's losing interest. So he reaches out more. He texts first, then texts again. He starts planning his days around her availability. When she's distant, he interprets it as something he did wrong, so he begins the apologies. Small ones at first. Sorry if I came on too strong. Sorry, I didn't respond fast enough. Sorry, I made you uncomfortable. And each apology, each adjustment, teaches the relationship a pattern. His behavior is always the variable. Her comfort is always the constant. He becomes the one who adapts, who accommodates, who manages her emotions while his own get quietly shelved. Now we're in phase 2. He's still going to the gym, but it feels different. He's doing it for her now. He checks his phone between sets. If she hasn't texted back by the time he's done, the whole session feels hollow. The work project that used to energize him now feels like an obstacle to her availability. His friends notice he's different. More distracted, more defensive when they point out he's been absent. And if they say anything about the relationship, if they suggest maybe he's losing himself a little, he justifies it. You don't understand. She's been through a lot. It's different with her. I'm just trying to be supportive. Which is code for, I've made her emotional state my responsibility, and I can't admit that I don't know how to stop. Then comes phase 3. And this is where the collapse becomes visible. He's now operating entirely in reaction to her. When she's happy, he's relieved. When she's upset, he's in crisis mode. He stopped making plans that don't include her because the one time he did, she said she felt neglected, and he can't handle the guilt. He stopped asserting his needs because it's easier just to agree. The sex has changed too. It's less frequent, and when it does happen, something's missing. He can feel it but can't name it. She's going through the motions. And here's the cruelty of it. He's done everything right according to the cultural script. He's been vulnerable, communicative, emotionally available, endlessly accommodating. And somehow, it's made everything worse. What he doesn't see, what Foucault would see immediately, is that he's been operating under a completely false understanding of power. He thought power in relationships was about force, about dominance, about control. So he removed all of that. He made himself soft, pliable, endlessly giving. But power isn't just force. Power is the ability to define reality, to set the frame, to remain centered while others lose their center. And by abandoning his own frame, by making her comfort the highest priority, he didn't eliminate power from the relationship. He just gave it all to her. And now she's in a position she never wanted, having to be the adult, the stable one, the person who holds the frame for both of them. And she resents him for it, even if she can't articulate why. I once spoke to a man who described this exact trajectory. He'd been with a woman for 2 years. In the beginning, she pursued him. She would drive across the city to see him. She rearranged her schedule. She told her friends he was different. But over time, he softened. He started prioritizing her emotional fluctuations over his own mission. He stopped going to the boxing gym because she said it made her anxious that he might get hurt. He turned down a work opportunity that required travel because she said long distance scared her. And slowly, month by month, he watched her attraction evaporate. She stopped initiating sex, started picking fights about nothing, eventually told him she needed space, and within a month, he was dating someone else. Someone who, on paper, looked worse, less stable job, more rough edges, less emotionally available. And he couldn't understand it. He'd done everything she said she wanted. He'd been the good guy, the safe guy, the one who listened and cared and sacrificed. But here's what Foucault would tell him. You weren't in a relationship. You were in a power structure where you systematically gave away every advantage. And then you were confused when you became powerless. She didn't want you to abandon boxing. She wanted to see if you would. She didn't want you to turn down the work trip. She wanted to know that your mission was bigger than her comfort. She was testing the frame, the way women unconsciously always test the frame. And you failed every test by prioritizing her short-term emotions over your long-term sovereignty. And the man she left you for, the one who seems objectively worse, he passed those tests without even knowing they were tests. Because he never made her the center, he remained the center, and she orbited him. And that structure, as unfair as it seems, is what her nervous system recognizes as strength. Now let's zoom out from the individual man to the system he's operating in, because his confusion isn't accidental, it's structural. We live in a culture that has completely inverted the scripts around masculinity and power. On one side, men are told that traditional masculinity is toxic, that stoicism is repression, that emotional availability is the highest virtue. On the other side, the sexual marketplace ruthlessly rewards the exact traits the culture claims to condemn. Women say they want sensitivity, but they sleep with certainty. They say they want equality, but they lose attraction to men they can control. This isn't hypocrisy. It's biology layered under socialization, and the two don't always align. Foucault wrote extensively about how discourse creates reality, how the way we talk about things shapes what's permissible, what's desirable, and what's even thinkable. And the modern discourse around relationships has created a trap for men. They're told to be vulnerable, so they are. They're told to communicate their feelings, so they do. They're told to prioritize emotional intimacy, so they make it central. And then they're quietly punished for all of it, not through explicit rejection, but through the slow withdrawal of desire, respect, attraction. The woman doesn't even know she's doing it. She just knows something has shifted. He's not the man she met anymore. He's needier, heavier, more exhausting, and she can't respect him the way she used to, even though he's doing exactly what she said she wanted. This is what Foucault meant by disciplinary power. It's not someone holding a gun to your head. It's the internalized monitoring, the constant self-regulation according to norms you didn't choose but have absorbed. The man regulates himself. He edits his desires, his opinions, his schedule, his mission, all to fit a narrative about what a good partner should be. And the more he regulates, the less attractive he becomes, because attraction doesn't respond to compliance. It responds to presence, to groundedness, to the man who knows who he is and doesn't negotiate it based on her mood. The system, dating apps, social media, corporate HR culture, family courts, has made masculinity itself a liability. Approaching women in public is now framed as potential harassment. Being assertive at work risks being labeled aggressive. Expressing standards in dating gets you called controlling. And if the relationship ends badly, the man is always one accusation away from social or professional destruction. So men adapt. They become softer, more careful, more passive. They wait for signals. They let women lead. They apologize preemptively. And then they wonder why they feel like ghosts in their own lives. Foucault would call this biopower, the regulation of life itself, not through violence, but through the shaping of norms, behaviors, and desires. And modern men are experiencing a form of biopower that attacks their sense of agency at every level. You're free to choose, but every choice has been pre-shaped. You can pursue women, but only in the ways that have been approved. You can express yourself, but only within the emotional registers that don't threaten anyone. You can have standards, but only if they align with what's culturally acceptable. And the result is a generation of men who feel paralyzed, who retreat into pornography, video games, workaholism, not because they're lazy, but because every avenue toward actual agency feels mined. Here's the cost if you stay blind to this. If you keep operating under the assumption that more accommodation equals more attraction. If you keep making her emotional state your responsibility. If you keep abandoning your mission every time she expresses discomfort. You will wake up 5 years from now in a relationship that feels like a job you can't quit. Or you'll be alone, wondering why every woman who seemed interested eventually pulled away. You'll be smaller, more bitter, more confused. You'll have a catalog of grievances about how you did everything right, and it still wasn't enough. And you'll be surrounded by other men who are having the same experience, all of you reinforcing each other's victimhood, none of you seeing the structure underneath. If a system demands your vulnerability but punishes you for showing it, the system isn't broken. You're just misunderstanding the game. Foucault's insight was that power always functions, even when it looks like it's been dismantled. The question isn't whether power exists in your relationships. It's whether you're aware of how it's moving and whether you're participating consciously or unconsciously. Most men are unconscious. They give away their leverage piece by piece, mistaking self-abandonment for love, and then they're shocked when respect disappears. She doesn't kill your mission, she reveals its absence. If your life falls apart the moment she enters it, the problem wasn't her presence. It was the hollowness she exposed. If you have no center, no mission, no internal structure that exists independent of female approval, then any woman who offers you attention will become your entire world. And the moment she becomes your entire world, she stops being able to respect you. Because women don't respect men who need them. They respect men who choose them from a position of strength, not desperation. So let's talk about what changes when a man understands this. Not as a list of tricks or tactics, but as a fundamental reorientation of how he moves through intimacy. First, notice when you're editing yourself for approval. This is the foundation. Most men don't even realize they're doing it. They're mid-sentence, and they shift what they were going to say because they sense it might create tension. They're about to decide about their Friday night, and they pause, checking mentally whether she'll be upset. This pause, this internal editor, is the mechanism of self-subjectification. The sovereign man notices it and refuses to participate. He says what he thinks. Not to be provocative, but because his internal reality has value independent of her reaction. When she disagrees, he doesn't scramble to smooth it over. He lets the disagreement exist. He lets her be uncomfortable. And in that space, something shifts. She sees that her discomfort doesn't control him, and paradoxically, she relaxes. Second, stop making her emotional state your emergency. She's upset. Maybe it's about you. Maybe it's not. The default male response is to fix it, to absorb it, to take responsibility for it. But here's what Foucault understood. The moment you make her emotions your problem, you've entered a parent-child dynamic, and she will resent you for it, even as she accepts your care. The sovereign man listens, offers perspective if asked, but does not take ownership of her internal experience. He knows that her emotional weather is hers to navigate. This doesn't make him cold. It makes him stable. And stability is rare enough that it becomes magnetic. Third, refuse to abandon your mission when she expresses discomfort with it. This is the test that most men fail without realizing it's a test. You have a Thursday night commitment, gym, work project, time with her father, whatever. She wants you to cancel. She frames it as, I miss you, or I feel neglected. And you think the loving response is to cancel, to show her she's the priority. But what you're actually showing her is that your structure is negotiable. That your word to yourself means less than her mood. The sovereign man says, I hear you, and I'll see you Friday. He doesn't apologize. He doesn't over-explain. He holds the boundary. And in holding it, he shows her that he's not a man who can be pulled off course by emotional weather. And this, more than any amount of reassurance, makes her feel safe. Fourth, allow loss instead of negotiating for scraps. This is the hardest one, because it requires you to genuinely be willing to lose her, not as a bluff, not as a tactic, but as a real acceptance that if she's not aligned with your path, she doesn't belong in your life. Most men sense the misalignment and immediately start negotiating. They lower their standards. They tolerate disrespect. They accept behavior they know is unacceptable because they're terrified of being alone. The sovereign man does the opposite. When he sees the misalignment, he creates space. He doesn't chase. He doesn't plead his case. He moves as if his life will be fine either way, because it will be. And often, not always, but often this is when she returns. Not because he played a game, but because she felt the absence of a man who wasn't begging for her approval. Fifth, build a life that doesn't require her presence to be meaningful. This is the ultimate frame. If your gym habit collapses when she's not watching, it wasn't real. If your work loses meaning when she's distant, you've made her your purpose. If your friendships fade because you've made her the center, you've betrayed yourself. The sovereign man builds a structure independent of female validation. He trains because it's part of his identity. He works on his mission because it matters beyond her acknowledgement. He maintains friendships, pursuits, rhythms that exist whether she's there or not. And because of this, his invitation into his life is valuable. She's not filling a void. She's being invited into a life that's already full. This isn't about becoming cold or closed off. It's about maintaining the center that attracted her in the first place. Because here's what most men forget. She didn't fall for the man who needed her. She fell for the man who didn't. The man who was going somewhere. The man who had standards. The man whose life was interesting before she arrived. And the moment he abandons that to prioritize her comfort, he becomes a different man. Not a better one. Not a more loving one. Just a weaker one. And she feels it before he does. So here are the two paths in front of you, and you're choosing one right now, whether you realize it or not. Path 1. You ignore all of this. You continue operating under the belief that more accommodation will eventually be rewarded. You keep making her emotions your responsibility. You keep editing yourself for approval. You keep abandoning your boundaries the moment she expresses discomfort. And in 5 years, maybe 10, you'll be in a relationship that feels like a slow suffocation. Or you'll be alone, scrolling through dating apps at night, wondering why you keep attracting the same dynamic. You'll be more bitter, more confused, more resentful of women, of the culture, of the game itself. You'll surround yourself with other men who feel the same way, and you'll build an identity around your grievance. And you'll be smaller than you are now, because every year you'll have handed more of yourself away in exchange for approval that never lasts. Path 2. You take this as initiation. You recognize that the discomfort you feel when you hold a boundary is not a sign you're doing something wrong. It's the sensation of sovereignty being reclaimed. You stop performing vulnerability and start building structure. You make your mission, whatever that is the center of your life, and you invite her to join you there rather than abandoning it to join her. You let her be uncomfortable sometimes. You let conflicts exist without scrambling to resolve them. You say what you think. You walk away from situations that don't serve you. And in 5 years, maybe 10, you'll be a different man. Not louder, not more aggressive, just more solid, less reactive, less desperate. And the people in your life, including the women, will respond to that solidity in ways that feel effortless because you're no longer trying to earn respect through self-abandonment. This path is lonelier at first because you'll lose people who were only there because you were easy to control. You'll lose women who wanted a project, not a partner. You'll lose friends who preferred the version of you that never challenged them. But what you'll gain is yourself. Your days will feel like they belong to you again. Your decisions will come from your center, not from the anxiety of losing someone's approval. And the relationships that remain, or the new ones that form, will be built on actual respect rather than the performance of it. Foucault spent his life showing us that freedom isn't the absence of power, it's the conscious navigation of it. The sovereign man isn't trying to escape the dynamics of power in intimacy, he's aware of them. He sees how they move. He understands that every interaction is a negotiation, and that the man who's willing to walk away is the man who never has to. He knows that her comfort is not his responsibility, that her attraction is not something he can negotiate, and that the only thing he truly controls is whether he remains centered in his own life. A man who makes a woman the center of his emotional world hands her a power she didn't ask for and cannot respect him for giving away. This is not a theory. This is a pattern you can see in every relationship around you if you look closely enough. The man who loses himself doesn't become more loved. He becomes more resentful, not because she's cruel, but because the architecture of attraction doesn't reward self-abandonment. It rewards presence, sovereignty, the quiet confidence of a man who knows who he is and doesn't need her validation to confirm it. She does not kill your purpose. She reflects its absence. And if this landed somewhere in you, if you felt the truth of it underneath the resistance, then share it with the men who need to hear it. Subscribe if you want more of this work, and keep moving as if your life depends on remembering what you just read. Because it does. The man you're becoming is not the one who learns to please her better. It's the one who stops needing to.